and welcome to this week's episode of the Sohbet Podcast. My name is Siobhan.
And I'm Dave. You made it sound like we did this every week, but we're doing this fortnightly.
I know, but I should have said this fortnight. Is that a thing? This week's fine. It's a week. It's still a week. I'm not wrong.
I wasn't pointing out that you were wrong. But it's weird. This episode's slightly weird. We've never done this before. We are recording this episode before the one before it comes out.
Yeah, I think this is what some podcasters do when they have a week of work where they're back to back doing their interviews or doing their whatever tasks they've set themselves for their podcasts.
You mean professional podcasters?
I'm also thinking...
I can't even say the word podcast. That's how professional
that's how professional we are. And I'm actually referring to some dog shit things that I watch on YouTube.
Is this people that eat loads and loads of shit food?
The professional eaters of the world, yes, David.
I don't know if you can describe them as podcasters.
Well, I thought you were going to say professional eaters because they definitely consider themselves professionals at what they do, which is hilarious. But something I do know that they do is they have recording seasons, as it were. I mean, it's not a sport, but they like to refer to it as such. And some of them will do, because they're putting on an awful lot of weight, or could be if they're doing 2 to 3 eating challenges a week.
That doesn't sound good for you.
Oh, it's terrible for you, clearly. But one of them's a professional bodybuilder outside of that. That's the only reason she started doing it. So she'll only actually do it for 3 to 4 months of the year, and so record all of her content, for want of a better word, in those months. And then the rest of the time, she's just doing a normal life.
So does that person spend 3 months being fat and 9 months being jacked?
Yeah, pretty much.
That could be the name of their autobiography when they write it.
It could be
3 months fat. 9 months.
They've
jacked.
got so many other catchphrases and rubbish things that they say. So let's not give them any more. And
I don't think they're listening.
Katina, if you're listening. Katina.
Oh, Katina. Yeah, that sounds more like someone who is a professional eater on YouTube.
And her partner's called Randy.
And of course, Randy's called Randy.
Atlas is his nickname. He likes to call himself. It's awful. I mean, if you ever want to...
Is it Randy Atlas?
No, it's Randy Santel, but for some reason he calls himself
Randy Santel is way cooler than Atlas.
I don't know why he calls himself Atlas.
Randy Santel definitely sounds like a made-up name that you would pick if you were a professional wrestler or something.
Yeah, Randy Santel. He does sound or a porn star from the 80s.
Randy Santel.
Oh, yeah, actually, no, he does sound like a wrestler. But anyway, we're not...
My cock's Randy, my brain is Santel. It doesn't really make sense.
I don't think that makes any sense. I like it, though. So just like professional eaters of the world that dump their crap on YouTube. I don't really want to think about where they dump their crap. We've basically, very similar to that, we recorded 2 in a week.
Very exciting. So the point is that we're doing this one blind without all of the usual deluge of feedback that we receive.
We get from our many listeners
after every single episode. So we who knows? By the time this goes out, we could be dead. We could be cancelled. We could be. I don't think we will be.
I don't think we'll be cancelled.
Or dead. I like that cancelled is even less likely than dead.
Who knows? Or the world might have imploded. There's a general election happening the day we release the last episode.
That's a good point. So we have nothing to say. This is going to be 2 weeks after that, and I'm sure everyone's going to be up in arms or happy, or no one's going to be happy. We're not going to get into politics again, but I think it's and maybe we touched on this when we did find ourselves getting into politics a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I don't think anybody's going to be... So clearly Labour are going to win our election for those people overseas.
If this comes out in 2 weeks' time and there's been an absolute shit show and they didn't win, this is going to be very out of touch.
Well, they definitely will win, but I don't think that anyone's going to be, screaming from the rooftops happy.
Well, everyone's already upset with them because of their flimsy... saying one thing. They're already saying one thing, going back on things.
Well,
I don't know the ins and outs.
They've got nothing to go back on. They haven't really provided us with any idea of what they're planning to do. They're basically what they're running on is the fact that they're not the Conservatives.
That's true.
And that's going to win them. That's going to win them the election. And and fair enough, but it's not exactly 1997, is it?
Things can only get better. What are they using for theirs? That's what I want to know.
That's
I don't really care
I haven't got a clue.
I saw a picture of Keir Starmer. I did not know that's what he looked like.
In fairness, you saw a picture of Keir Starmer on the back, I think, of the thing that the Conservatives put through our door. So it was a purposefully bad picture of him, I think.
I don't know. I think it was one he picked. I thought it was on the Labour thing.
Oh, maybe.
With
because on the back of the Hastings Labour leaflet,
we've had a few, by the way.
We've had loads of Labours. Only one Conservative, because then they've given up. But on the back of one of those Labour leaflets, it says Ross Kemp says vote Labour.
I mean, and that has swayed it.
That put me off. I was thinking to myself, fuck this shit. I'm voting Tory.
Well, if Ross Kemp
tells me to vote Labour, then I can't bring myself to. So I'm going to have to pick. There was another guy, I can't remember even the name of his party, but he, on his, keeping in mind, he's a local MP, would be, he's clearly not going to be, a local MP for Hastings and the surrounding areas. And I think second on his list of his policies was that he was just going to sort out Palestine.
He's going to free them.
He's going to free Palestine.
Second thing.
The MP of Hastings and St Leonard's
potholes
is coming in hard. He's just going to fucking get it done. He's had enough. He's going to get it done.
Potholes and Palestine.
Potholes and Palestine. That's what he should have said.
Potholes, peace and Palestine. If he was a beauty pageant winner for the Hastings area.
So fingers crossed he gets in and he can sort out the bloody mess.
I think he was also going to sort out the homeless as well. He's really doing a lot.
And it wasn't just the homeless in Hastings. Oh no, ladies and gentlemen, it was just all homelessness. He's had enough. He's had enough of all the problems that Palestine are facing and the problems of homelessness.
Yeah.
And he's just going to sort it out.
He's going to do the whole lot. No indication of how.
What
he's
a
just
guy.
going to do it.
I wish I could remember his name so I could tell you all to vote for him 2 weeks after the vote happens.
Well, you can work it out when you see your ballot, and you can vote how your heart feels on that moment. How about that? How about that?
There you go. Again, 2 weeks late.
2 weeks late. Who knows? Who knows what's happened?
So we have been starting off this Sohbet podcast for the last few weeks since we changed our name from the Breakfast Punx.
Yes.
Just in case this is the first time you've listened. If this is the first time you've listened, it might be worth going back a couple of episodes and giving. Well, I'm getting confused because one of them's not out yet.
Maybe just the last two.
The last two episodes. Basically, since we've been called Sohbet, it will give you a basic primer as to what it is that we're going to be talking about. Although, maybe not, because we're not entirely clear now, but we were even less clear 2 episodes ago.
Yeah.
So, do what you want, I suppose.
I think that's the whole point.
Fundamentally, my message to you. Siobhan would like you to vote for whoever you want, and I would like you to do whatever you want, within reason.
Yeah, no harm. Do no harm.
Yeah, care for others.
I thought you were going, well.
I don't do what you want.
No, when I said do no harm, you were like, yeah. A little bit of harm. No harm.
Anyhow, we like to start this podcast off by saying one thing which has filled our hearts with joy, with awe, with meaning. And I would like for you, Siobhan, co-host of the Sohbet Podcast, to let us know what you have done in the last 2 weeks, or again, very confusing, last week, we're all confused here, to fill your heart with awe.
I like that we're using the word awe now, because I feel like that's a new addition, and I think it helps me ever so slightly with my one, because I just went to a gig with one of my oldest best friends, and the band we went to see is a band that I haven't seen in many years, but were one of my favourite bands in, 2007, when I first saw them. Me and my friend Mel, she drove down from London. She's not long had a kid. Actually, that kid must be 2 years old now. So I don't get to see her as often. She drove down from London to Brighton, and we went to see a band called CSS. If anyone knows who they are, they probably passed many people by as pretty rubbishy electro indie thing, but I was well into that in 2007. I still really like them, and they were so much better than I thought they were going to be. They just had the exact same amount of joy and ridiculous dancing and just absolute joy for what they were doing. And whether that's practice because they've been doing it a while, who knows?
Ream.
Exactly like
things
D-Ream.
Can only get better.
If Let's Make Love and Listen to Death from Above is not Keir Starmer's music that it comes out to tomorrow, I'm questioning where I'm going to vote. And if it is, oh my God, I'm out. I'm so in.
How do you think elections work? When you say the music that he's coming out to, do you think that you're going to get to, is it a wrestling event?
Don't they just come out? Isn't
it
like that?
Out and then you get
they all come out,
and you just like pin your vote to which one you like the best?
I hope it is a bit like that. Is it not like that? I haven't voted in at least a year or two.
No. It's not like that.
That's very shame. So anyway, there's tons of reasons why it was really, really good. They were amazing. They were so full of joy, so really enjoying being around each other in what appeared to be a genuine way. Of course, who knows how rehearsed it is, but the feeling that I got was one of very much genuine love for each other on the stage. And their music is just so silly. Like, it's silly, it's only about enjoying yourself. So it was just perfect in all that respects. It was the beginning of Brighton Pride weekend as well, so everyone was very, very up for it, for a party and for a dance around to some electro. And the other thing, when I was writing my journal, because that's probably where it gets a bit highfalutin and lame.
Have you given that journal its full title?
Well,
or is it not a gratitude journal?
It's a bit of I'm going to call it a contemplation. Because it's not always great. Because sometimes
it's almost more twatty than gratitude.
It is. Oh, it's definitely more twatty. But there are days where it's not that I have nothing to be grateful for, but there's days where I'm also in the same realm. I hate getting to the end of a day where I've probably been miserable, but I can still think of one thing to be grateful for without acknowledging the fact that I should have, or I would have liked to have acted differently. So it feels like it isn't always just gratitude. Because if you get to a crappy day and you haven't treated people as well as you'd like, or you've been miserable, if you only write the thing that you're grateful for, I feel like I'm lying to myself a tiny bit.
Metaphorically, also, doesn't it? It's almost a bit like an Instagram picture of yourself where you look at your best.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to the 300 that you took where you look like shit. Exactly
that. So yeah, there's been a couple of days where I'm like, actually, I wish I could have acted a smidgen better. And so yeah, so contemplation maybe is a better word for it. All twatty. So anyway, when I was writing in my diary, I was thinking about other reasons why it was really good, and seeing Mel was really amazing. She's already told me she doesn't listen to this, so I can definitely say whatever I like at this point. It's all going to be compliments, but I don't have to feel like too weird. And I do want to find a way of saying this to her. But she is one of the few, whilst we were talking, I realised, that explicitly only asked about me and other people and really didn't make any element of any conversation about her. And she's got tons of stuff to talk about, and she's got tons of life but she really is great at drawing out, being interested in other people, drawing out what they're about, drawing out what people in my life are about via tons of conversation. And I just thought there are so few people like that nowadays, especially, I don't know, maybe just in my life. And I could feel it about me.
Sorry, Siobhan's friends.
No, but I just think I don't know. I think I noticed in myself, oh goodness, I talked about myself a lot. How much, and I'm wary that maybe I didn't ask as much, and this is just the silly brain that happens to you when you're overthinking maybe. But I really noticed that Mel is one of those people that just is so interested in other people. And it's not because she's got nothing to say. There are people that I've met that only ask about you because they're desperate that you don't ask about them for whatever reason. Maybe they're anxious, maybe they're boring in the nicest way, maybe you've just got nothing much to talk about. But Mel really it was just making so much effort, and I just noticed it and just thought that is such a noble quality that in the world of now, where sometimes you can be in a conversation going, how are you? Oh, let me tell you about my life because it's really bad. And then maybe that person it doesn't really get back round to the rest of the room, if that makes sense. Whereas Mel, definitely not like that. So, loads of things. CSS, very good, full of joy. Mel, amazing. Journaling's pretty good too. That's what I did.
I wonder whether that's based more about superficiality of how we're expected to engage with each other in a world where most of our engagement happens in such a superficial way by no one's fault. Yeah, and I mean, we're not just going to bash social media again. We went on about that a lot in the last episode, but I do sort of think, your oldest friends, you already don't have a superficial relationship with.
That is
so
true.
If you're engaging with someone on a non-superficial level, then it opens the world up to actually having conversations about interesting and complex and just everything. Hopefully a bit like the conversations that we have. But and I don't just mean on this podcast, although I suppose in a way I sort of was referring to that in this context. But whereas I think the culture around us all expects us to engage on very superficial levels because it encourages very superficial behaviour.
Yeah.
If you're going to talk to somebody, and again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago or a couple of episodes ago, if you're going to engage about politics, there's no space to have a nuanced, complex discussion with most people about politics because everyone just wants to say the correct thing as quickly as possible, as bluntly as possible. And that doesn't lead itself. That's not really anyone's fault, but it doesn't really lead itself to having a deep conversation where you're actually interested in what the other person says, because all you want to say is "fuck the Tories, yeah, the shit, aren't they?"
Yeah,
and it's like, that's fine. I'm not against that point of view necessarily, but it doesn't lead to how are you? What do you think about these elections coming up?
Yeah, exactly. Let's just reflect at each other what's expected of us and move on.
I don't necessarily think that is a critique of the friendships that you have with other people. I think it is a critique of the culture in which we're all sort of mixed up in.
Yeah, and that's, I didn't, and then please, current friends, it wasn't specifically at anyone. It's just more.
No, I wasn't suggesting it was.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I think it is. I think it is just even people who. I think it's just more a current thing. Like, I definitely feel it in myself. Like, that's kind of where it came from. I was trying to think. Gosh, a bit too ego-y sometimes.
But it's normalised too. So I mean, I think. And this might be the psychiatric nurse in me in some ways, but I definitely am a person who, when I meet people for the first time, ask them a lot of questions, right? And I don't say that to be like, Dave's such a great guy. You know that thing you've just described? Well, that's me. Yeah. I don't mean that at all, but it's
what
just...
a geezer.
It's more, someone called me a geezer today, ladies and gentlemen, on the street, and Siobhan found that very amusing and claimed that the only reason he'd called me a geezer is because that's what you call old people. Whereas I would like to argue it's because I'm kind of a cool dude to this guy.
Yeah, to that guy you sell sci-fi books to.
I don't really know very well. Yeah. You've knocked me off my point now.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So I am someone who asks people a lot of questions when I meet them for the first time, and it's, to be honest, it's probably more about being anxious of social situations and things like that, and probably not really wanting to talk about myself and what have you. But anyhow, I find that actually when you ask people questions about themselves, large numbers of them are quite uncomfortable with that. And so the thing that you're describing as a really good thing, actually, I think, again, it's a weird thing, but within our modern society and culture, when you meet people, to be interested in them is kind of like threatening. But
then we do this other thing where it's expected of us to give loads on social media, and people will happily do so, to the point where you actually negate the need, and I don't necessarily mean this, but the need is often negated to even ask about people because it's already online. And actually sometimes a conversation starts with, oh, I saw that you did this.
100%.
And it's like, that sentence doesn't make sense unless you realise you're talking about, oh, a picture was put up, and therefore people who don't really maybe even deserve to know about you, whereas your closest friends, you're not having these conversations with that are like open and honest and interesting. But that's social media, and that's the culture.
But this is where, see, my experience of the last 6 months has been fucking mental.
Yeah.
So having not been on social media and not seen anything on social media, it means that the vast majority of things that happen to my closest friends, I have no idea about.
Yeah, because they don't talk to you about it.
Because there's no need to bring it up, because everyone just knows.
Yeah.
And then equally, I have like strangers who I see have come into the shop at work or something and said, "Oh, saw that you got married," and things like that. And I'm just like, "Who are you?" Like, or not even who are you? I mean, it's normally it's people that I know to a point, but it's like, so I've not even had the opportunity to say to most people, "Oh, by the way, I got married."
Yeah.
And this is where we got married and what we did, and here's a picture of us getting married and whatever. It's like they've seen it all already.
Yeah.
So there's the conversation is it is you. 100%. But I'm not complaining.
Trying to like desperately be like, oh, that was someone else.
But I'm not complaining about that. No, I totally understand, and it is what it is. But I'm just saying, it's so weird to be and I was going to say the person, like I'm the only one, but I mean, I feel like I don't know anyone else actually who's completely in my position.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are loads, and again, I'm not special or anything, but it's just fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Every now and again, I'll hear about something quite big or even serious, that happened to somebody who's like a close friend of mine. And it's I had no idea that happened 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because social media has taken away the need for us to actually converse with each other.
Yeah,
so
exactly
therefore,
that.
again, going back to your point, I think our conversations all just end up being superficial.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's bizarre. And one other thing about that story is I've already brought up 1997, and now you brought up 2007. So this is the year of the sevens, guys. I've got nothing to say about 2017. But I happen to be reading a book from 2007 at the moment, and it just struck me reading this book, which is fantastic. It's called Affluenza. It's all about the illness that we all get when we get too rich. But it's bizarre because it's like reading about a different world. Because 2007 was a different world. But because I'm an old man, 2007 to me sounds like when you describe CSS.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not so old that I sort of think to myself, "Oh, that modern pop group."
Yeah, but you don't think they're old.
No, I definitely wouldn't see them as an old band.
No.
But of course they are.
Yeah.
20 years probably since their first stuff.
It's crazy.
So that is a long time ago, and so a lot of this is about being old. But it's just weird to think that in 2007, with the description that you just gave of that band. Being joyous and having fun and being happy to be with each other, and then having an experience where you actually had a deep conversation. If I remember rightly, my 2007 was fucking full of that.
Yeah,
that's kind of what
all it was.
That was just normal.
It's I think it's again, not to go on about social media, but it's pre me having a Facebook account.
But it's pre-Facebook.
Yeah,
Facebook's about 2012 is the year where they generally speaking, when people talk about things, that's when they all existed.
Yeah,
but 2012 is when the smartphone became like what it is now, and and kids started like getting social media accounts when they're little and all that sort of stuff. So 2012 is the year that most academics and things pick as sort of the year that social media completely took over the world. And that's 12 years ago, so that's a long time ago as well. But actually, it's bizarre because I generally look at the noughties as being quite a shit time for culture and life. But that's just my personal choice. But I don't know. It was better. It was a lot better.
Yeah.
I saw a strange thing. Someone sent me this video, and I still can't quite put it together. And I'm not going to say this is a good thing, but it just brought it to mind. And it's not really 2007. It was a video of Corey Feldman being sort of interviewed by Fred Durst and Kid Rock and some other man who I didn't know, but I think might have been a rapper from that sort of era. And I'm going nowhere with this apart from to say that it was fucking bizarre. From what I can make out, it was a kind of ironic joke. But the thing that interested me the most about it was that it seemed like Corey Feldman, even though he was in on the joke, and I'm sure everyone knows who Corey Feldman is, but he was a child actor in Hollywood who has gone on to... He dances exactly like Michael Jackson a lot.
Oh, he'd like you for saying that.
No, yeah, maybe, but he definitely does. No one can say he doesn't. But with the hat and everything, he's
definitely trying to. Yeah,
he's completely mad. There's so many different things that have happened to Corey Feldman, and he's obviously was ruined by the Hollywood machine. But he's just this person who he was in. From what I can make out of this thing, it was supposed to be a joke, and he was in on the joke. But even when he was in on the joke, it felt a little bit like there was another joke going on that no one, including me, was aware of, but he was the butt of it. Do you know what I mean? It was just so bizarre. It was all. He's so separate from humanity. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with anything. It's just sort of 2007 made me think of Limp Bizkit.
Separate from humanity, like you.
Well, yeah. So maybe coming off social media is a little bit like being Corey Feldman. In which case, it must be quite fun being Corey
Feldman being the butt of Fred Durst's joke.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Fred Durst and Kid Rock were the butt of the joke. They should have been. Don't get me wrong. Feldman's not, got no particular amount of talent, but in comparison to those two pricks.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't think he's selling out Dreamland anytime soon.
Like Bryan Adams, is that who you're bringing
up
Fred
again? Durst.
Oh, Fred Durst.
They played the next night after Bryan Adams. Not to keep going on about Bryan Adams. They played the next fucking night.
Did they?
Yeah. Sold out that whole thing.
Jesus Christ. Limp Bizkit are so back, and kids like them. Like, proper, like Gen
weird.
Zs love Limp Bizkit, and a lot of... And I know they all dress that way, so it's probably an element of being a bit like me in the 90s, like in the Sex Pistols or something. But like, it's fucking bizarre.
It's almost exactly that, actually, time-wise.
Time-wise, it's exactly that. But it doesn't make sense culturally. Because assuming that Limp Bizkit are not woke. I think we can all agree on that. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with
maybe
that.
Maybe this is a backlash to woke that I don't understand because I'm not 21.
I don't think the kids are having a backlash to it.
Maybe no. I'm not saying they shouldn't and that they are, but maybe it's like something that they don't necessarily understand yet. But it's like it is the antithesis, and for some reason they like that as well.
It's just bizarre. I just don't know what they could possibly make of like their lyrics and stuff. They must just think that they're being sarcastic.
What, Chainsaw what?
Well, not
maybe more the boobs and the other ones.
I mean, I don't know. I've never listened to a Limp Bizkit album, but I can only assume that what they talk about is more extreme than what I've heard of their singles and stuff.
I don't know.
And Fred Durst is definitely, I don't know what age he is, but he wasn't young when he was doing it. He's very Gen X. I mean, it's like absolute, and the whole band is very Gen X. They're not millennials. So he might even be a boomer at this point. That's not how it works.
I don't think it is, no. Anyways, that's my story. Mixed with God knows what that you came out with. Dave, what have you been putting in your God-shaped hole? I'm going to keep saying it because it's so funny. That has brought you joy, meaning, or wonder, and has made you slightly happier, better, more meaning-focused.
Very succinct.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you've stolen my thunder a little bit because mine was going to be music as well. I mean, I felt like I talked about the big issues.
Fred Durst. Was it going to just be Fred Durst?
No, last episode.
Oh yes.
So I thought I'd do a little throwaway one now, but then you also did almost the same thing. But mine's slightly different to yours. Mine is the band Armoured Saint.
Yay!
Armoured Saint were a kind of thrash band from the early 80s, but they kept going for a while. And we are going to go and see them in London in August. And basically, the reason that we're going to see them is that their singer, a man called John Bush, he was the Anthrax singer. Again, Anthrax being one of the big four thrash bands. During the 90s, he joined in 92, I think. Sound of a White Noise is his first album. It's either 91 or 92. Maybe even 93. It's fucking fantastic. I loved it when I was a child, and I was proper into sort of metal. I mean, I'm still proper into metal, to be honest. But we've recently kind of got back, I would say, into the swing of just basically listening to heavy metal.
Yeah.
But that era of Anthrax with John Bush in it, which went on for quite a while, throughout the 90s and right into the noughties, and I think he probably didn't leave until the end of the noughties, to be honest. And they made like 4 albums with him. All of them are fucking brilliant. He's got a fantastic voice. And so I loved it when I was a kid. And then at some point, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but there's, God only knows when. I don't know why. You must have. Why. So Siobhan's expressed an interest in 90s heavy metal at some point. And so we were going on a long car trip. And so I very quickly, without too much thought, I mean, I put thought into it. I don't mean that. But it was just a real quick, like, I'm just going to make loads of CDs to play in the car of 90s heavy metal. And it was easy for me because there was a bunch of my favourite bands. So it's just a bunch of stuff. Biohazard, Machine Head, Pantera, some stuff that probably didn't go down as well, like the Wild Hearts and the Almighty. Curb Dog, I think you quite like. There was some random stuff. There was a Quicksand song on there which grew into something bigger in your world, I think. But there was a load of 90s era Anthrax, only 90s era Anthrax. I don't really like any other Anthrax, if I'm honest. Sorry, I was going to say Puritans, purists. But this guy, I just love his voice, and I love that era of Anthrax so much. And you did too, it turned out. When we put this on, that was the thing. I mean, it was one of many things. I mean, I think maybe Biohazard was even bigger for you. But I'm not really sure what you like the most. But the point being that he had been in this band Armoured Saint, who I had never listened to before, and then hadn't really listened to Anthrax for God only knows 20 years or something, and I wasn't really even aware that he was in another band or that he got back together with this other band until very recently. We listened to a couple of their songs on YouTube, and they were all right. They didn't exactly blow me away on first listen, but they're playing in London, and so we were like, fuck it, I just want to hear John Bush sing. I've never seen Anthrax live. I've never seen Anthrax with him live. They were supposed to play Wacken, which is a German music festival we went to, which we talked about a bunch of episodes ago. But they pulled out, and that wouldn't have been with him anyway. So, as a result of us buying tickets to go and see Armored Saint, I thought, well, we better learn a few songs. So I just went on the old Discogs, bought 3 of their albums. Fuck me, are they good?
Yay!
One's really early, and that's all right. I think it's probably the one that they're going to play all the songs off, because I think it's like their classic album, but it's not my favourite. But there's an album from 1991 which is fucking great, and it must have been just before he got into Anthrax. And then there's a new album from, I think, 2 years ago, which is fucking brilliant. So we've just been listening to that the whole time. And so fundamentally it's just that. I mean, genuinely, you know, I suppose I want to throw out the idea, but you already have, so again, you've sort of stolen my thunder, that if there's one thing that I gain transcendence and awe through, it's having experiences, mostly when you discover new music. I think when something comes along, you're not necessarily expecting it, and it just blows you away. It's like going to a gig and the support band is fucking brilliant, and it completely blows you away. That's my, if you that's when my God-shaped hole is absolutely rammed full. And it was kind of like that. Like I said, we haven't even seen them live yet. I imagine they're probably going to be brilliant. I can't wait.
They're going to be so good.
I mean, I can't wait to see them. But it doesn't really matter. And I think, but the other maybe bigger point that I wanted to bring up is this thing that about how music, and this is definitely true of what you brought up as well, plays such a massive part in our sort of biographies.
Yeah.
Like this total random thing happened once when I was 12 years old, I think, or 12 or 13 years old. I bought an album by a band because I'd heard the name and it was a cool name and they had a good logo. And then fell in love with it, aged 13. Then left it alone for 20 years. Then went back to listen to it and was like, fuck me, this is amazing. Then, 30 years later, probably, best part of, you then hear it, you love it, and then it's all going to sort of come full circle. And it's just this weird thing. I don't know, it brought up so many different thoughts in my head. It brought up things along the lines of, isn't it fucking mad that we are living in a time where John Bush is alive and we can go and see him sing?
I know.
I know that's a silly thing, but I mean, think of all of any art, music is probably the one that jumps to my mind the most, but like, we all could have been born at any time. It's only by pure chance that, I existed. I was of an age where I existed at the same time as Fugazi. You know what I mean?
That's like really at the same time.
That is pure chance. Yeah. There's no reason for that to have happened. It's utter chance.
Also, that you weren't born into a field with a tribe with no internet access and no access to music as well. It's not just time; it's also place. It's so, which just narrows it down ridiculously even further.
Or born into another country or whatever. Like it's and I think it's the type of thing that is so easy not to appreciate. And I never appreciate it often, although it tends to be music that brings it up the most. Yeah. But or you could even go a bit deeper, and I mean, this is maybe going a bit too romantic, but it's like, what are the chances that I am the more or less similar age enough to the other 3 people in my band, or the other, I don't know, 30 people that I've been in bands with over the course of the last 25, 30 years. Yeah. In order that we happen to be in the same place at the same time, ended up in a room together, made music, and then all of the fucking joy that comes from that, and all of the experiences that come from that. It's insane.
It's a lovely way to look at it.
And your life could just be so different. If I was born in 100 years' time, there's no way that I would listen to Sound of a White Noise by Anthrax and think, God, this is fucking great. Or there might be.
Then goodness knows what that version of whatever it is then. It's just about appreciating the now and what you have.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's any better than anyone else's experience. I mean, I personally am extraordinarily glad that I lived through the 90s because I do think it's an incredible time for music. And I do think that subjectively, but I also do appreciate the fact that that's just because I was a teenager during that period of time. So, of course, all of that music seems amazing. And it's much easier to think that now because so many people of a younger age are going back to that music and listening to it and trying to sound like it a lot and stuff. But so, subjectively, I do think the 90s was a particularly special time. But no question, if you'd lived through the 60s, you would think the same thing. And no question, probably, if you lived in the 1890s, you'd be like, oh, but the music halls were so fantastic, or whatever, or I mean, some people were alive the same time as, I don't know, well, I'm not even going to be able to name, Einstein or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. That's someone.
Or an artist or something. Somebody bumped into William Blake and just walking down the street in London.
There were people that went to William Shakespeare plays at the time.
Yeah, totally.
Not much documented of that apparently, but people did do it. It's amazing.
But yeah, so we are very lucky to just by chance both live at the correct time and happen to have stumbled across the experience of listening to, like, for example, DIY punk. I mean, most people don't even know it exists.
No, it's very true. Very true. Even at this age and where we are. Well, we should probably get into the gubbins of what this episode was going to be about.
Yes, we probably should. So I think we are going to deal with possibly if you've listened to the last couple of episodes, you might have had a question on your lips about this subject as to whether we've gone mad about it or not.
Maybe we have.
And maybe we just need to discuss the word of God. The word of God. Religion. The R word, the G word, whatever you want to call it. Now, one of the reasons was it struck me when I was... I can't remember I think it was the very first, maybe the last episode that was called Breakfast Punx, when we were sort of introducing the fact that we were going to do this. I realised that a lot of the stuff that we said then, particularly when we were getting into stupid things like God-shaped hole and stuff, it would have been a lot easier or a lot clearer to the listener as to whether we had gone mad and become like mad religious people or not, if we had just said something along the lines of, I mean, we're both atheists, but... Or, or we're both agnostic, but, or whatever. Or we had just explained ourselves a bit and said, we are, I now think this about this subject, and Siobhan now thinks this about this subject. It would have just cleared it up. But partly because I'm an arsehole, and partly
different A word altogether.
And partly because I want this podcast to be very nuanced. I mean, you didn't say anything either, so I assume you were maybe, I don't know if you were coming from the same place or not, but I was very aware of the fact that I didn't want to at any point say,
this is what I think.
Make a joke about a God-shaped hole, but then say, but of course I don't believe in God. I mean, don't worry about it, guys.
Well,
so, but as a result of that, we might have come across as people that had sort of gone away and found religion.
Religious, crazy people. Which we're not, or are we? Ooh.
Well, that's the thing, and I still don't really want to actually, address that. I would just like to talk about the subject in general, but I will say this, and because I think a lot of what we're going to end up talking about at least stems from this thing. About 3 years ago or something, I read a book by Alan de Botton called Religion for Atheists, and it so happens by chance that you had it on. I thought of doing this podcast episode, and pretty much when I thought of doing this, you said, "Oh, I'm going to read that book next." So, or synchronicity, or just chance, pure chance. Yeah. Who knows?
Or the amount we kept talking about religion in the last 2 episodes. Maybe it was that, I don't know.
But yeah, so I thought we'd just address it as to exactly why it is that we're using words like spirituality.
Yeah.
Why we're using words like transcendence and awe, throwing them around, saying things like God-shaped hole, when fundamentally, I think, particularly if you know us in any way, you probably thought to yourselves, I didn't think David Siobhan were... I mean, Jesus Christ, I mean, the first 2 Haest EPs are literally just purely anti-religion, pretty much, I think.
Very true.
And don't go too far back in the dead anyways. If you go back to our demo, it was just all that. That was all it was.
Gosh, really? Yeah, angry at God, were you? Or the non-existence of?
Yeah, kind of. But I don't expect anyone to know that, because, I mean, why would you? I'm not sort of saying that like, I'm Dave from the Den anyway.
They're all going to dig it off their shelves now.
Well, no, but, we had a song literally called No Faith, so it's, so it isn't, I suppose, I can say this, it isn't that we've found religion or that we've gone mad necessarily. It is more that, and partly based on this book, and partly based on the fact that I've been studying some religious studies, doing in my uni course, and I'm actually now going to specialise starting next year in religious studies, because I've actually found it incredibly interesting.
And also, I know we've mentioned it a lot, but this John Vervaeke Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lecture series does seem to focus a lot on the aspects of this book that we're going to talk about as well. There's a lot of crossover about the religion comings and goings and where it's left us as humanity.
And there's quite a lot of podcast chatter, I think, but it does stem from the darker. Well, I don't know how dark all of these are, but the places that I think most people would write off as the darker end of podcasting, the sort of male, the old white man, famous podcasting people. A lot of them are talking a lot about the subjects that we're probably going to talk about, I think, and I haven't necessarily followed that because it's not really the sort of thing that I listen to very much, but I think there has been a reaction against the new atheist movement. So let's start there. So going back to the early 2000s, I'm not going to pretend to have been aware of this at the time, but obviously I was aware of Richard Dawkins, particularly, who wrote The God Delusion. And so there was, and Sam Harris, who's someone that you like a lot.
Yeah, he wrote The End of Faith the day after 9/11.
And the whole book in one day.
He started writing it. He did. He's a psychopath. He's pretty good, but he's not that good.
And that, I think, I think it's generally considered that from that, around about that point, I think, particularly in the West and particularly in Britain, we were already a secular nation by the time the early noughties came along. I mean, I've never, whilst I said, the Lord's Prayer at school.
You sing hymns every day?
Yeah, sang hymns a bit, and I assume that's something that people don't do anymore. But I might be wrong. I don't actually know that for a fact, but I assume that's probably not what people do at school anymore. So, I mean, to some extent, we were religion adjacent at the point where I was growing up and when you were growing up. But I think that again, whenever I say the world, or whenever I say I'm going to be clumsy about my words, but I'm generally talking about the Western world, and maybe specifically Britain and Western Europe, because America is very different. Religion had gone away, really. It was definitely something that only a handful of people were interested in. And that's a much bigger conversation that we can't really have. But just, that more or less is considered to have stemmed from the 60s. There's this idea that people went from being religious, generally considering themselves, specifically in our nation, Christians, to being spiritual. So I'm spiritual, not religious, became the kind of main, or I'm talking in generalities, but it became a much bigger sort of movement, as it were. And then slowly over the years, I think religion has just sort of left our culture completely. And then the new atheists come along, basically said it's all complete nonsense, and it's doing you no good. In fact, it's doing loads of harm to the world. And so at that point, I think it's not completely unfair to say we more or less became an atheist. Mainstream culture became an atheist culture. And I think that a lot of the chatter that's been going on in the last few years maybe has been around the fact that maybe that wasn't such a good thing, and maybe a lot of the problems that we now face in society could be seen as being influenced by that. A big one being the mental health crisis, loneliness crisis, the fact that there's community has lessened a great deal over the course of the last couple of generations. Selfishness, self-obsession, lots of different things. One of the things that I often think of is the 7 deadly sins, which I'm not going to be able to name them all because I'm sure I'll get some of them wrong or forget one or something, so I'm not going to. But we all know what the 7 deadly sins are. I feel like our modern day culture, particularly in the social media realm, but just generally, is now a celebration of those 7 deadly sins, right? Now, you could say, yeah, that's brilliant. That's fucking great, because we have fun and we fuck who we want and we do what we want and we have great time. We eat what we want, But has that been good for society? Well,
I wonder, so just you mentioning the sins thing and that kind of idea that now we're almost embracing it and look potentially where it's got us. It reminds me I'm going to say tick or plus point of religion, or an aspect of religion that is now lost, is that years of wisdom. So whilst that the books that are referred to in religions are written forever ago, and so people just go, we can't base our entire lives based on the intellect of people 2,000 years ago, or much older for some religions. The point is, an argument could be made anyway, that a lot of wisdom, years and years and years of wisdom went into those at that time, and that humans are still made of the same stuff, and there were things that were understood about humanity then, that when we push religion away, we push, because obviously there's a lot of dogma. Like, dogma probably could be argued is the problem, but maybe we'll get to that another time. But there's things that are useful that people in religions learn about humanities that we can't escape. And so these 7 deadly sins are one. And we need reminding probably quite a lot that we're very flawed and we're very capable of always being subject to those things. And we're not immune from that ever, because humanity is all going to have those issues. And every religion has a version of it. Everyone talks about greed and lust and envy as bad things. Yet, like you say, things like social media and the general culture and capitalism completely fuels it and goes, yeah, do more of that, because then everything will grow and you're great. But we don't have any reminders of those things being bad anymore. Like, it's not like religion was full of, and maybe, you know, this is where people don't like it. Like, there's a lot of like smithing and a lot of reminding that you're a bad person and you're inherently sinned and you must repent and all this, especially Christianity anyway.
I do think that it's quite healthy to be reminded that you're a bad person.
But then you can aim to be better. And
that's what I mean. But you need to accept the fact that you're a bad person before you can aim to be any better than you are.
Exactly. If you already think you're amazing, then when people come and tell you you're wrong, you'll assume, no, fuck you, you're wrong. And actually remembering that you are flawed means you can always do better. It means that when someone tells you something about yourself you don't like, take a second to realise, well, maybe there's some truth in that. But also it means you can connect with other people. When someone does something hurtful to you, you can remember, well, I know they're screwed up because I'm screwed up. Like, I have the same problems they have, and you can have a bit of it's the first step in many arguments to compassion for others. But
forgiveness.
And forgiveness.
Something that the modern world has completely forgotten about.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And so, yeah, the opposite is now celebrated, encouraged. And actually, if you don't do that, then you're, you know, removed from people's lives in some way. So yeah, but the problem is it gets tangled up with the dogma of religion. And, you know, one thing that atheists like to potentially use in their like weaponry is, there's no God, prove there's a God. And that becomes the like bulk of an argument. And it's like, who cares if God is a real human being in the sky, or if he's a being, or if he was a spirit, or if he was an energy, or if he was an anything? That is a minute part of the wisdom teachings and the guidance from these things. And if your only argument is to be like, yeah, but that's wrong, then, which has been the culture I grew up in. The culture I grew up in is there's no God, so the rest of it's total dog shit. And I've never, ever even considered that any of the other stuff was useful. And I imagine if I feel that, others do.
There's a problem there, though, as well, because so certainly within Christianity, there's a group of people, and C.S. Lewis is the most famous one of these, I would say, that are called apologists.
Right? Oh, okay.
And so what apologists are, they're not really apologising. That's sort of it's an odd word to use in a way, I think. Although I'm sure there's a basis for it. John Vivecki would know where this comes from. He likes his words. But apologists are people that kind of engage in that argument from a religious point of view. So they say, well, no, here's all the reasons why it's very likely that God does exist, or here's all the reasons why it's very likely that Jesus did come back from the dead, or whatever. Yeah. And so the problem is what you end up with, and this is, I truly believe this is the problem with organised religion, but actually with religion full stop, or any sort of belief whatsoever, is that the humans have to put their paw prints all over it. Yeah. So what happens is that a bunch of atheists they're making the wrong argument. So let's ignore, you know, I'm not saying that I do, but people that believe in God, the least important thing to them is whether that's provable scientifically. Yeah. That's not even, it's just not where they're coming from. There's no interest in that, but also it kind of misses the whole point. Like, if there is a God, then no, obviously that isn't going to be provable scientifically, because that just shows how pompous science is. Yeah. That you think science is so perfect and amazing that you can literally prove the existence or non-existence of something which is like if it was real, is like a million times more intelligent or whatever than you are, you know. So,
and science proves and disproves itself every day.
Oh, yeah,
so
of
it's
course.
funny that we hold that in the highest regard and we can poo-poo the rest.
Well, yeah, and also it has a very specific argument that it does, which is too big of a conversation to get into probably. But I mean, science takes something and proves whether that thing is true or not.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of, I don't know, that's like putting your finger in the dam to stop the water coming out. Like, it's when it comes to kind of arguments about the supernatural.
Yeah.
Like, it's supernatural, so you can't prove it with science. Now, don't get me wrong, that does not mean it's real. That's not my argument at all. But yeah, science gets that wrong. And so they start making these arguments of just kind of, well, we've proved that the Big Bang is true, and it doesn't say anything about that in the Bible. Or I know there was something that Sam Harris said, which is very sensible, which is basically that if the Bible was actually written by God, then why doesn't it explain all of the findings that we've found out in physics recently? You know, all of these bizarre scientific things that we've discovered in recent years. Why doesn't the Bible? Why did they talk in all of these riddles and say, well, that misses the entire point of the entire thing, you know? It's kind of like saying, well, why is this novel not written in maths? You know, it's just, it doesn't make any sense. But the problem is that then people engage with those arguments, and so then Christians appear to be these people that are saying, oh no, there's loads of evidence for Jesus coming back from the dead or whatever. It's like, well, just if everybody just fucking left it alone and took it on face value, then it has some worth to give us potentially.
It's true. I guess it's also the idea of that I've never considered these sorts of I'm going to call them stories, but that's not really the way. Like religious texts, I've never really considered them in the way of, we know the word parable, and parable is like owning up to, you know, in the Bible, Jesus told parables. So this person called Jesus in this book then told a story that was made up to prove a point. And I think I've never considered the books of religion in that way, and in a way you could accept everything if you just go, let me just start 1 second. Let's just say, for example, all of this is myth, and myth not because it's fake, but because it's a story that's going to get you to realise something. And there may be truths in it. It's all blended, and it's not really important which bits are true and which aren't, because the point is how you end up feeling and what you realise at the end of it. It's how John Vervaeke described Buddhism, and he talks about the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, leaving the temple that he grew up in, the palace that he grew up in forever, and then his like journey into the countryside and his transcendence from there. And he quite rightly points out, he goes, this might not be true, that's not the point, you need to think what the stories tell you. And it just kind of awakened me a tiny bit, not to use the key word awakened, but it made me realise, I totally just accepted that this was truth, or meant to be true, and therefore, you know, the atheist parts of me go, well, how much of that is true? Maybe I can take something from this. But when someone actually acknowledges, like, from the beginning, like, whether or not it's true doesn't matter, it's the point of it, you can then apply that, you know, it's easier to apply to something where Buddhism was literally just saying this is a very ordinary man who had a very ordinary experience that we can all have, and this is how you do it. Christianity is not really pretending to do that. Christianity is kind of setting a sight as a bit higher on, this is the Son of God, God exists, and this man is the Son of God. But if you treat that with the same lens of, okay, suspend my belief a tiny bit to then see what you're trying to tell me, then you can see it in a completely different way. And I have never ever felt that or realised that was a possibility, because the idea is not true, so I'm not going to take anything from this.
Truth is almost the least important aspect of religion, I think.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that most religious people would agree with me.
No,
but I do. I feel that quite strongly.
Yeah, I now also feel that way, and I'd never really even acknowledged it as a viewpoint. I was just like, you have to. Again, it's dogma. Like it's the difference between something being a myth in the nicest version of the word myth and dogma. Dogma, like, well, this is, you have to accept this is absolute truth. And that's where people get in a tiz about how, you know, we can't believe every single word that this 2,000-year-old book said when we're cleverer than that now. It's like, yeah, of course. Like, there are tons of things in these religious texts that you should not ever do and believe 100% because they involve killing your neighbours for working on a Sunday, or fucking like non-believers, just shun them out of your life. Like, there's just so many.
Keen on slavery too.
Oh, very keen on slavery. Just tons of bad things. So of course, dogmatically, these books should not be believed every single word, in my opinion. But that's not to disregard that there's any use in them.
So my take on that has always been, and I think this would be considered ignorant by most, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
So take the Bible as an example. The Bible was written by human beings. So of course it had human foibles in it.
Yeah.
And now I think Christian people would say no, it's God writing through those people. So every single word in that Bible has come directly from God and you have to take it as such. And then an atheist would just say, oh, well, it's a load of rubbish. It's just a load of people writing nonsense. I sit somewhere in the middle where I sort of say, well, the basics of it could sort of be, you know, maybe aspects of it are certainly wise.
Yeah.
There's definitely lessons to learn. And let's just say that there's a vague possibility that it is true. You know, the big plays, as it were.
Yeah.
But the actual minutiae, the bits that say, you know, I'm allowed to have slaves, it's think about it now. If the Bible was written now, people would have Donald Trump would have a chapter probably, and he'd say, you know, I think that I should be allowed to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I should ever go to prison.
Yeah.
You know? Like, so
God.
I don't know why it's impossible to think that the people that were writing it back then also had, you know, even if they were the nicest people in the world, and they, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, I don't know anything about these people, so I'm not saying that Paul or whoever was. I
think Paul was one of the nice ones.
Right, so good, because
well.
I was going to say I'm not describing him as being like Donald Trump. But I think, but there is a problem there, and I think that this is ultimately the problem with looking, because I coming from a very secular place by saying that. The problem is that if you can pick and choose the little bits from the Bible and you can say, oh yeah, but that bit's probably just somebody putting their own opinion in, whereas that bit that I agree with, that bit's actually the word of God, and
it's true.
Then you end up in trouble. And I do think that one of the biggest positives about religion for human beings, and this might be a bit controversial, particularly to free thinkers, is that it tells you how to live, A, and B, it doesn't give you a way out. It doesn't let you say, oh, I know that one of the 10 commandments is, you know, thou shalt not kill, but he did really piss me off. Yeah. You know, so I think that that's probably, in a way, what our society is almost like missing to a point. I mean, or you certainly, you could kind of argue that. But ultimately, I suppose, going back to the reason that we're doing this podcast and we're using these sorts of words for this podcast is something that Alan de Botton talks about. I think in Religion for Atheists, he certainly talks about it somewhere. You've read it more recently than I have, so I get his things mixed up a bit. Yeah. But it is about the fact that when secularization started, and now we're going back far in history, you know, around about the time of the Enlightenment and the time of the Romantics, people were questioning religion, questioning the ways that they should believe, and at that point, we're not a secular society by any means, but it's definitely what has kind of led us to where we are now. And those people suggested, and this has happened throughout history as well, that religion needed to be replaced by something. So if we were all going to say, so, you know, science fundamentally, going back to that, science is the thing that has more or less, I would imagine in most people's views, disproved religion as an actual thing, right? So science has come along and it has almost replaced religion. But what the people in the Enlightenment and the Romantics were saying was more that, okay, that's fine. So let's say, you know, no one's going to believe in this silly story anymore. You know, there's no God. We're all just here by chance. But we can't take away all of the things that religion have given to people just like that, just because it doesn't exist anymore. The fact that there isn't a man sitting on a cloud doesn't mean that we don't need rules to live by. It doesn't mean that we don't need rituals to complete. It doesn't mean that we don't need community. And to some extent, even things like prayer. We need these things because those things are innately human.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm kind of talking about when I've said in the past, by accident, I should never have said God-shaped hole, but it seems to come up every fucking episode.
It's just a good slogan, David.
It's a terrible slogan. But yeah, at this time, what they decided was, if decided is quite the right word, that those things could be replaced by culture. So they could be replaced by art.
Yeah.
So people started creating all of these amazing music. It's no surprise that following on from the Enlightenment, that there was suddenly all of these insane movements forward in architecture and in music. Yeah, I mean, we're talking classical music, I suppose, there. And in painting, and we had this sort of huge abundance of just the most incredible art being created.
Yeah.
And the idea was that this stuff could sort of replace religion. So when we're talking about awe, for example, awe is I think a very important thing that we're lacking in the modern world, but B, also a very important part of religion. So when you're talking about awe, you're talking about two things, really. One is the feeling. I think the first thing that jumps to probably most people's minds will be like, if you stand and look at the Grand Canyon and there's this massive expanse and it's incredible and you can't understand it. That's an important aspect of awe. You don't quite understand it and you're just amazed by it, right? That's one side of awe. But the other one, which is less, I think, thought about, but probably the more important, is that it makes you feel tiny.
Yeah.
It makes you feel completely insignificant. Now, of course, when everyone was religious, everybody felt insignificant because they had a god. So there's this, this magical man.
And they knew that they were. They didn't just feel it. They were like, oh no, I know that I am tiny and there's tons of people that feel the same as me, but there's so much more than me everywhere.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily sound like a great thing, particularly in the modern world where we're all told we can be whatever we want to be and we should aim high and we're all going to be famous for 5 minutes and we're all amazing and you're perfect and, whoever you are, that thing is very important and, but actually it's really healthy. And we talked about Stoicism. I think we've brought up Stoicism on every episode so far, and I'll try not to on the next one. But, that's a really good example of that. It's like, if you think that you are perfect, then when you turn out to not be, because I hate to tell you, everybody, you're not at all. When you turn out not to be, you're going to feel really depressed and sad.
Yeah.
And so that feeling of awe, I think, is a very important one. And so you used to get that from religion. Well, the idea was that you could replace that with art, right? Now, go back to almost any other time in history, apart from the last 15 years, and you can totally see how that was being done. So, and this is, and also add to this like things like community and stuff like that. And so use punk as an example because it's definitely what's given me meaning throughout my life. In the 90s and the noughties, and definitely before then as well, but it was before my time, so I didn't know firsthand. Punk gave you lessons in, it gave you a political outlook, or it gave you questions to ask about, that political outlook and anything else. It had a philosophy, it had a community, it had music that would make you step back because it was so fucking great. And so that replaced, to me, I would say that replaced everything that a religious person gets from going to church. Now, there's nothing wrong with whichever way you get it. If you go to church and you can believe in that, then I think that's fucking great.
Yeah.
Good on you. If you can sing those songs and you can be with those people and you can learn those philosophies and that fills you with awe, fucking brilliant. But I don't think that anybody, I know that you're not going to argue with me, and in some ways I almost want to find someone who might have an argument against this, because I know that we're just bashing the sort of social media drenched world, but I mean, do we have any of that in the last 10 years? Like, community has definitely fallen apart. There's a loneliness epidemic. All of our mental health is much worse than it was even 10 years ago, but certainly 20, 30 years ago, and definitely 100 years ago. And that's absolutely provable. And not just because people are willing to talk about it now. That's a very easy out. I mean, there's actually provable markers that show that mental health, for example, like suicides, unattended suicides, those things, they don't change based on what culture you live in and how much you're willing to talk about your mental health. That's something that people have done at the end of a very long line. And so, that stuff, that sort of behaviour's gone up incredibly. And of course, and this goes back to the book I mentioned earlier, Affluenza, we're all much more comfortable and much more better off, and we should all be way happier than people 100 years ago. Right? I mean, people living in slums in Victorian London were happier than we are now. Can anyone explain that to me?
Well, no. I can't explain that to you. But I'm trying to pick up from something. I think something, going back to the Stoicism bit that you said, there's a bit in the Alain de Botton book where he quotes Pascal. I can't remember his full name, but this Pascal gets brought up quite a lot. I think he was Christian, but he... Christianity is extraordinarily pessimistic. There's a lot of pessimism in there, and it's for good reason, to remind us that we're all flawed. And he came up with this quote that I just think is absolutely amazing. We should definitely remember it. Man's greatness comes from knowing he is wretched. And I love that. And that is that sums up something that we are not encouraged to think about ourselves anymore. We're encouraged to be like, no, I'm amazing. And you're amazing. But how can we both be amazing when we're very different? Oh, wait a minute. Something must be different here. What's more likely is that we both have flaws. We can't both be amazing. Well, or we can be amazing in ways.
That's the modern... there's a lot of arguments about this. Children at school are all given awards no matter how well they do. Right? So if you have a running race, everyone gets a rosette.
Yeah.
Now, in every respect, you would have to say, well, that's lovely. It was horrible. I was a fat kid. I was rubbish at sports. Like, I was just basically always just told I was rubbish, and that probably didn't have a very good effect on me. But in a lot of ways, being given a rosette for coming last and being told you did just as well as everybody else, it doesn't give you anywhere to go, I suppose. So it means that you're always great. Anything that you do is great. Well, and superficially, that sounds brilliant. It sounds like a great message to give to kids, but it doesn't. But when you become an adult and you actually have to face real challenges, then it must be. It becomes a massive problem, because then you go and you try and become, for example, a psychiatric nurse, and you have to deal with actual real life situations. After 2 days, you're going to quit. Yeah. Because you've not been prepared for the fact that life can sometimes be difficult, can sometimes be hard. Now, I'm not saying, we should all, bring back the cane or something, That's not the point. But it's like, you have to be, I suppose you have to be taught that, we all have to be taught that we're useless somehow.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And taught that in a way that's humbling and comforting rather than useless. Because I think... like you say, if you were the fat kid at school and you didn't get all the awards and stuff, it can feel crappy. And so, the rosette for everyone seems like the easy fix. But I think it's about... it
probably led me on a life that ended up with me hearing Fugazi age 15.
Yeah,
though.
true.
You know what I mean?
Everything leads you to the right places.
Yeah.
But I guess the way that you would deal with... it's a life lesson, but there are other ways to deal with it. It's about realising you can't win every time. No one likes that rule anymore or that lesson. And it's about comfort in the fact that we're all got our flaws. We've got good things about us, but you've got to work hard for the good things usually. But take comfort in the fact that everyone's on that same struggle. And I guess that's what religion used to do in the grandest way of getting people together and realising it together. In fact, there's something that I've kind of noticed about... as we're learning about different religions, and you'll definitely know more than me, seeing as you've been studying it, but just from a lay person's point of view, getting to know some stuff about religions, the theme of suffering is inherent to all religions, and it's not meant to be sad. It's meant to be realising that things are probably going to be hard, and there's a joy when you get the goods. But you've got to put effort in. You've got to work. If you have suffering, everyone has suffering. So it's about realising to treat people compassionately rather than assuming that someone's been horrible to you because they're okay and they're being mean to you. No, everyone's having a hard time with various things, but it's about pulling each other up rather than like squishing each other down, which again, I don't think our modern culture encourages at all. People will argue. So when you were saying, I wonder if you can argue the other way, people will argue that Instagram and the wider ability to communicate with a large amount of people does that. You can, you know, someone can put up a post saying, you know what, I'm feeling really crap, and because we live in a world of open communication, technically, then I can put this up here and I'm outing myself and it's brave, and then I can get support and encouragement from people. But we used to do that face to face. We used to do that communicatively. We used to do that with people that we actually really know.
But we all know. So the problem with that is, whilst I get the argument, the thing is that none of us are stupid, particularly in terms of how social media works. So the thing is that by default is superficial. Because the thing is, if you put up a picture of yourself or something and you say, oh, I feel really ugly at the moment, and then 100 of your friends go on and say, oh no, don't be stupid, you're beautiful, you're so beautiful. Again, superficially, that sounds like it should be a good thing, and isn't necessarily a bad thing as such. But the problem is that you, as the person that's put that up, knows full fucking well that no matter what they actually think you look like, everyone's going to say that you look beautiful.
Exactly.
If you say I'm feeling really sad, everyone's going to say, oh, I hope you feel better.
Yeah.
And you know that doesn't, even though those people are potentially being genuine, it's almost like everybody involved in that interaction is probably being genuine and are probably nice people and are probably trying to do their best.
Yeah.
But again, it goes all the way back to what we were talking about earlier. Social media has made that zone completely superficial. So nobody, and there is an added bonus to this, and I'm sure people would argue, oh well, if I do this, I send personal messages or whatever. But I think that there is an added thing to this, which is that there is always a third observer.
Yep.
So therefore, and everyone's aware of that third observer. So therefore, if somebody puts up a picture and says, I feel really terrible, and Dave comes on and says, oh, don't feel really terrible, you're really great, there is also who knows how many third observers viewing the fact that, oh, this person felt like they were terrible, but oh, good old Dave's come in and said, I hope you're feeling better, and so's, someone else, and so's someone else. And that sets up an extraordinarily strange relationship between us all. That's really obvious. It's just what social media is, but it's very odd.
But it's everyone just feeding an ego, isn't it? It's so ego driven.
But again, it's almost not. So the thing is everyone involved in that is probably doing it out of genuine. They genuinely think, oh, my friend is feeling crap, I want to tell them that they want to feel better. But
doing it in a way that's built for ego.
Yeah, of course.
Because the actual way to do that is to just go and see someone. And then the more that you get from that, like, physical contact, it also means it has to be longer than a second. Like, this is the thing that I've found. Conversations don't last very long with people anymore. People are done talking to each other very quickly, unless you ask those questions.
But it's again, it goes all the way back to that same thing. So again, if somebody is put on Facebook, I feel really depressed at the moment, and then you've gone on and said, I really hope you feel better soon, right? When you actually see each other, there's no need to talk about how that person's been depressed anymore because you've done that.
It's almost the elephant in the room as well. Because I don't ask. I actually know they're feeling crap. Exactly. And what happens if I ask, or what if they're over
And that's something to do with avatar culture as well, isn't it? Although we don't necessarily see ourselves as being avatars anymore because that's quite an outdated concept, I think. I'm no tech person, but I think. But when you're on Facebook and stuff, you wouldn't consider yourself being an avatar, but of course you are, and in a lot of ways it's a good thing. Really shy people can be quite outgoing on Facebook, and really outgoing people can maybe reel it in a little bit or whatever. People that wouldn't normally be emotional can be emotional, whatever you want. And that stuff, again, superficially is good, but it kind of just closes the door of having any, I'm going to say, pressure. You have no pressure on you to then want to talk to your friends about that stuff because you can kind of get it out there in a sort of a different kind of a way. Yeah. And that pressure, whilst it's kind of unpleasant, because, I remember a time of being at school and feeling shit about myself and, being fucking male and not really wanting to get my buddies round and be like, oh, can we have a really serious conversation about how I'm feeling depressed or something? Yeah. In fact, I just wouldn't have done that. No. But so in that context, social media is great because it gives you the outlet to do it. But potentially having that pressure on you to only have that way of doing things is probably a good thing. But also, to bring it back round to religion, of course, if you go to church every week,
100%,
that's where
I was going to go.
people will. That's what people are going to be talking about.
And by where I was going to go with the conversation,
You're
not
going
to
church. Siobhan's going to church.
But that's exactly it. And it's something about, and I think it's actually more powerful. And there is a similarity that we can draw from modern culture, although we'll get to that. Is that it's not just you can be in solidarity with a room full of people. You don't even really have to say, there's speaking to people about your ills of the week. But there's something about being in a room with people all of a sudden that have all got issues. They're all maybe staring at a statue of someone that's got a comforting face and crying their issues at them. You don't actually have to even speak to the people around you. But when you're singing all those songs in unison, you are all there absolving yourself or dealing with, even if you're not saying to someone else, this is how I feel, you're there and you can just, through song or through staring at some art or the statues that are there, or speaking directly to the priest, you can share with those people this like experience and maybe feel relieved, light, joy. Like people cry their eyes out at these things because they're just so relieved and released. The equivalent of that was gigs. And his gigs.
Well, it still is, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone. I mean, I did tell that story about that guy that was crying at a Tool concert that time in 1996.
And what about Sebastian Bach? There was a man crying at that as well.
Well, I've not told that story on the podcast.
Oh, so. We'll save that because we might see him one day and maybe it'll come up. But, there is that when everyone's singing along in one moment and you're with strangers, you're not with people you're with the people that, when you're outside of there and you're passing people in the street, are you thinking the kindest thing of everyone that walks by? Possibly not. When someone cuts you up on the road or when you're in the supermarket and everyone's been a bit annoying. But when you're at these events or church, but let's go events and gigs, you're all there for one reason, you're all there to do the same thing, and actually you're with all the people that you may not get along with, but it doesn't matter in that moment. And actually what you realise in that moment is the ways you are more similar.
Well, maybe that's where social media has changed things as well. So, because I totally agree, 100%, we should all be extraordinarily, for those people that are listening to this, who regularly go to gigs, particularly if you're a part of like the DIY punk scene, we should all be absolutely ecstatic about this.
Pat yourself.
But here's another thing, that important thing that you just said about how it doesn't matter if you like everyone in the room. It doesn't matter if you're getting on with everyone. Yeah. That's changed because of social media as well. Yeah. Because now, if you say the wrong thing, then you can be ousted.
Yeah.
If you have a slightly different opinion to somebody else about, let's say, politics is the most obvious one to talk about, then you're not going to be welcome to come.
Forget the rest of your characteristics that are really lovely, that you've known for years and you're a good person and everyone's flawed, remember?
Or that the argument that you're having is completely fucking pointless and doesn't actually really matter one iota to the world at large.
Exactly. And it's good that someone's challenging your views because it may reinforce you, it make you think about yours. Debate is not a problem.
So, I mean, I do sort of think that, and blaming social media for that is maybe pushing a bit, and punk has always had this problem. I mean, I think I talk positively about the fact that if you go back to like when I first started getting into underground punk, we had all the politics that are now mainstream politics.
Yeah.
But when they weren't mainstream politics. The thing is I must say, in the 90s, we had all the same problems. The difference was it wasn't done through Facebook. It was done in fanzine columns, and it was done through letters to fanzines, and people were always getting called out for something, saying the wrong thing or whatever, and there was always bickering and there was always these problems. And I sort of think now, actually, the mainstream world has just become the punk scene of the 90s, and probably, again, it's before my time, so I can't say, but I assume probably the 80s too. Which is bizarre, really, but again, a very good reason why we need to be thinking really carefully about, or not we, because we're too old, the young people that are into punk at the moment need to be seriously thinking about what they want the world to look like. Yeah. Because the chances are, if you're a part of a counterculture, particularly a positive one like this one, that that in 20 years' time, that's what the government are pretty much going to be saying. That's what's happened about homophobia and racism and trans rights and every single thing, pretty much, that is going on. Your nan goes to Pride now. She didn't go to Pride in the 90s. Do you know what I mean? So, sorry, that's a point that I want to keep making, because I think that we're really fucking it up at the moment, because we're just going, oh yeah, that's what the mainstream are doing, let's do that. Well, there's nothing exciting about that, and no one else. No, as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm just old, but nothing's taken that place. It's not like there's some amazing ideas coming out of the grime scene.
There might be. Don't poo-poo the grime scene.
There definitely aren't. So this is kind of what this podcast is about. I suppose. I know we've said that already about other things, but I think that fundamentally
everything is what this podcast is about, because this is one the podcast.
But I don't know. I'm sure we haven't covered every area by any means, and I think maybe we'll come back and we might even just do the next episode about this again, because there's loads of different points that I wanted to make that I just haven't touched on. But time is getting on. But I suppose one of the things that I thought of, I read a thing written by someone who claimed to be an agnostic. Right, agnostic is someone who basically hasn't decided. They're not an atheist. They don't believe. They're not a part of a religion, but they can't decide. They can't say absolutely. Like, I think a lot of people would describe themselves as atheists, right? And I don't think that most people understand what that means.
Yeah.
If you are saying you're an atheist, that means that you think that you absolutely know without any question whatsoever that there is no God at all.
Yeah.
Most people, I don't think, fit into. You've got to be pretty hardcore to really believe that.
Could you be, and maybe this is what agnostic means, so I'm just going to phrase it. Could you be fairly certain that there's no God, but think that doesn't matter, and that you're still open to what religion is about?
You're trying to describe your own.
Hey, we're not talking about ourselves.
That is basically what an agnostic is.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
But
that definitely means that most people that say they're atheists aren't atheists.
That's what I mean. Yeah. But the reason I bring this up is that someone wrote this article about he's an agnostic who's basically saying, I hope not to be. So his point of view is that he's not sure. He finds it difficult to believe. He'd had a religious upbringing and then sort of left the church, like I'm sure most people do if they have a religious upbringing at 18 or whatever, and went and just had a normal life like we all would. He's not very old. He's only in his 30s or something. But he's more or less saying, or the point of the article was, I'm an agnostic, but I hope by the time I die, I'm not an agnostic anymore, more or less because I can't bear the idea of life just finishing. You know, I can't bear the idea that there isn't an afterlife of some sort. And it just struck me as being a very odd argument, and one that I just cannot get behind. And the reason that I bring it up is more because so I've maybe I don't think I've wrestled with anything really, but just going back to the reason why we sort of used some of these religious terms, any sort of wrestling that I do, and I'm not sure about you, but any sort of wrestling that I do about religion, or you know, what is useful, what is true, what is anything like that, has for me fuck all to do with whether there's an afterlife or not. I could not give a fuck. Like, and I don't mean that in a sort of flippant way, like, oh, you'll care on your deathbed. I think that life is better if there is an end point. Whilst I can definitely see some real positives about the idea of there being an afterlife where you're kind of to some extent judged, you know, I think that that's actually a really useful thing to have in the back of your head as far as actually being a decent human being whilst you're on the planet, particularly for the vast majority of human beings that aren't, you know, necessarily religious or don't give a fuck. But I literally, that is not, you know, I think I would probably describe myself as an agnostic, but I am not an agnostic because I'm hoping there's an afterlife. No. I'm not an agnostic because I hope that there's someone in the sky that can comfort me when I'm down. I would say that I'm an agnostic for all of the reasons we've just described. It's because the things that are missing in my life are transcendence. They are awe. They are community. They are, to some extent, therapy. Like, we didn't talk, these are the things that we probably need to talk about again. But, you know, what is your relationship with a priest or with a little group of other religious people if it's not a type of therapy? I mean, it literally is. And now we pay someone to tell us that everything, you know, was to do with how we wanted to fuck our mother or whatever. Being purposefully obtuse. But those are the things that we're missing out on if we don't have religion. So the beauty of that, the reason that I bring that up, is because obviously if you're an agnostic that's just hoping that there's life after death, you've got no control over that whatsoever. I mean, good luck. You can just decide if you want that there is, and then that, so be it. But what I'm actually interested in is the things that we're missing out on right here and now.
Exactly. It's the only time you know that you have right now.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is that doesn't involve any sort of magic. It doesn't involve anything religious, really. No. It just involves maybe taking on some of the concepts of religion. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a problem there because the society that we live in is absolutely one that doesn't do that. So as a little one, this is the thing that I wrestle with the most. This is literally my one problem with the world, and maybe I'm opening the door a bit too much, is that I need these things. I want these things. I want transcendence. I want community. I want awe. But I don't live in a world where anybody else seems to. Now, I think that everybody does, but I just don't think that anybody thinks in those terms anymore because we've lost religion. And so it's a bit of a catch-22 because in order to get it back, you need to say, look, guys, all of these amazing things that came from being religious. Yeah. Everyone was way happier. Everyone, had all of this stuff. And we don't have to believe in a little man in the sky who's going to tell us what for. And obviously, we've been very, very Judeo-Christian about every time we've talked about religion. And I think it would be very interesting, and this is something I really want to do, and we will do at some point, to talk about a lot of other, like Hinduism. And Buddhism I appreciate is more philosophy, but there's an element of the supernatural to it as well, in some strands. But anyway, we can get to that. But I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that the stuff that, if I think to myself, God, I wish I could be religious, and I sometimes think that, and I've definitely thought that in the past. God, I wish that I could just turn my brain off and believe in this thing.
Like Robert Anton Wilson.
Like Robert Anton Wilson, although, of course, after a year he gave up and decided that aliens were real.
He still believed in something, didn't he?
He believed in a lot of different things, but it was mostly because of the LSD.
Well, that's the way you do it, Dave.
well, that as well.
You could be religious today.
But, it's got nothing to do with believing in the little man in the sky. It's got everything to do with learning lessons from a bunch of people that are way wiser than we are. And this is the same as philosophy. We think in the modern world, just because we have science and we've all gone to school, that we're suddenly wiser than everyone. We're not wiser. We're cleverer. We've got more books.
Yeah.
The most Alan de Botton definitely makes this point somewhere.
He definitely did. It was amazing.
Like the philosophers, that everybody, a large part of our society is based on. These philosophers might have owned like 6 books. Yeah. Because that was just the time that they lived in.
Exactly.
And so that's insane. So we are cleverer than them, but we are not wiser by any 100%. Means. And we can write them all off because they're all white men, from history. They all probably had slaves. They all had very terrible ideas. Probably.
One of the best philosopher of modern times was a Nazi who literally doesn't apologise or didn't apologise for it.
I don't think you should use the word best, but yeah.
No, not best, but as in some of the
person who had the
not
best ideas.
Sorry,
maybe.
that was awful. But like some of the more affecting and interesting and amazing, and specifically they're about care. This dude was a Nazi and did not apologise for it up until his death. Crazy. So that's so fucked up in my brain.
But so you can write all of these people off, and you can say, oh yeah, well, actually we've got much better thinkers now. We don't. And it's not because they're not smart, it's not because they're not intelligent, and we clearly have some great thinkers, but we're all, and this is another, please, for God's sake, right? It's not a very good book actually, but the argument is excellent. Stolen Focus is a book which basically provides evidence to show that because of our diet, because of social media use, because of media generally, and to some extent, I think probably because of like the chemical makeup of the world and climate change and what have you, we are all unfocused and stupid as a result of these things, or made more unfocused and more stupid as a result of these things. And it's hard to judge to what extent that affects every single one of us, including me, you, and the best minds of our generation. It's hard, almost impossible. But it is something to think about sometimes when you sort of write off, or if we wrote off, thinkers from the past.
Yeah, because they didn't have any of that.
They didn't have any of that, and in fact, all they had was the time and space to think. Which we don't, and we're all happy to sit here and say, oh, I don't have the time to think anymore. My job is so busy and all of these things, and all of that is true, right? But let's look at the other side of that coin and say, well, if all of those things are true, then we're just going to have to accept that we're probably not thinking very clearly then.
Yeah.
You know, we're
Maybe
not
we
brilliant.
don't know everything.
We're not perfect. We don't know everything.
Why don't we take some wisdom from the thousands of years before us rather than deciding we know everything right now? When we're all really
1,000.
thick?
Let's talk about 3,000.
Thousands.
Thousands.
Tons of time.
Tons of time.
Tons of time.
Well, we've gone on for tons of time.
Yes, we
Siobhan.
have.
So I think we should probably wrap it up.
Dilly.
We will see. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks, your time.
Yeah.
Fuck only knows when we're going to be recording it.
Who knows? We're the professional eaters of podcasts now, and we're going to maybe we'll just do tons in a week, and then we'll binge. I mean, I have no idea. I'm trying to use terminologies that cross podcasting and professional eating. I don't think there are many, especially not when it comes to religion and spirituality.
Please do send us an email at shamcityroasters@gmail.com if anything that we've talked about today is of interest to you, or you would like to tell us that we're idiots for the way that we've discussed any of this.
And please debate it. Oh my God.
Please
tell us we're silly and then we can talk about it.
Yeah. And I do very much appreciate, by the way, that all of our complaints about how we get all of our discussion out via social media, and then when we get in the room with people that we actually know, we no longer have things to talk about. I appreciate that doing a podcast is pretty much the ultimate version of that. We're going to put all of our deepest thoughts out into the public sphere.
Well, if anyone listening who knows us in real life wants to have a conversation about this, fuck me, come and talk to us about it.
Yeah,
I'd love to have these conversations. I mean, I'm assuming the lack of means that people don't want to do that. But no, a few people who I know who we have sort of meaningful conversations from time to time have messaged me having listened to this with interest. And, you know, I hope the next time that we meet up, we do end up having conversations like this. We should all be having these more. Not to go back to the beginning, me and Mel had tons of conversation like this, and she doesn't listen to this podcast.
But I think more importantly,
just very important to me.
But more importantly, it's not about we're not trying to make you our friend here. Have conversations like this with other people, or not even like this, but conversations about other things that you think are really important.
Yeah.
Maybe you've listened to this and thought, God, those guys are completely mad. What
Go talk to someone else about how awful we are.
But you might think something. You might have loads of thoughts about, I don't know, Freudian psychology or something. Go and talk to your mates about it.
Exactly.
That's how we're going to call it a day.
That is how.
Go talk to your mates about it.
Wait.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.